All right, everybody, welcome back to the First Team Fantasy Podcast. We are going to be going over the Thursday night results between the Bears and the Commanders, and then also going over our Sunday morning games. To kick it
Yes,
off,
indeed.
the Bears traveled to Washington to play the Commanders and won 40-20. The Bears' offense looked very good yet again. Justin Fields and DJ Moore especially. Justin Fields finished 15 of 29, 282 yards, 4 touchdowns, 11 carries for 57 yards. We love rushing from our quarterback spot in fantasy. He finished with basically 33 fantasy points, his best outing of the season so far. And I think we're starting to see a bit more consistency on the fantasy end from Justin Fields. We're feeling a bit safer playing him. Um, he was a guy that we said to start this week. If you did, that is fantastic news. If you did not, his next couple matchups are also very favorable. He plays the Vikings and then the Raiders after that. So if you didn't start him this week, definitely a guy you're inserting, for the foreseeable future. Again, the receiving game, there's not much to touch on other than DJ Moore. He's the only Bears receiver that caught a pass this game. He had 8 catches for 230 yards on 10 targets, scored 3 touchdowns, and a whopping 49 fantasy points. So DJ Moore owners are absolutely rejoicing. That's a monster week, setting you up in a Thursday matchup. I'm sure you're projected to win, and with a 49-point outing, more than likely you should this week. The only other,
We've seen some pretty big games out of people this year, so you never know. This is
yeah,
one you never know.
yeah, and
But a hell of a start.
absolutely, and
If you had the stack, then maybe you're a little closer to
oh
feeling
yeah,
comfortable about winning this week.
oh yeah, and the other receivers, I mean Darnell Mooney, St. Brown. Darnell Mooney saw 4 targets. He's out there getting cardio. He had a chance very early in the game to catch a deep ball that he didn't necessarily run well. He could have just kept running and caught it. He tried to turn around and then backpedal a couple steps, and it went a little past his arm. So, I mean, Darnell Mooney and then St. Brown left the game with a hamstring injury. Worth mentioning, you're obviously not rostering him. Darnell Mooney is even getting to a point where it's, the passing
He's very
offense,
droppable.
yeah, it's evolving, but just not with him in it. Um, Cole Kmet, on the other hand, is the only other viable option on that Bears offense through the passing game. He had 5 catches for 42 yards on 5 targets, caught a touchdown, 15.2 fantasy points. And, he's definitely a guy worth starting, especially from here out with these favorable matchups coming up. I mean, the Commanders
And he was the
were,
tight end that we talked about this week that we
yeah,
liked, and we liked that he had that touchdown upside. And he gave you another one of those this week.
yeah, and the Commanders coming into this week were the number 1 defense against tight ends, and Cole Kmet had a very favorable game against them. So I mean, if you started Cole Kmet this week, another great play. If you didn't, he's definitely and he's on your bench. Depending who you got as your starting tight end, I mean, if you have a Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, guys like that, I'm looking to flip Cole Kmet immediately. I think he can draw some very valuable pieces to round out your team, but him and DJ Moore are the only 2 passing threats on that offense. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
yeah, the run game, Khalil Herbert had a very productive game when he was on the field. He finished 10 carries, 76 yards. Didn't catch a pass, had 3 targets. That's a bit disappointing, but he only finishes 7.6 fantasy points. He left the game with an ankle injury. Was seen on the sideline jogging around. He says he'll be fine. He also gave that update. I don't expect him to miss time, but he only played 66% of snaps. So if you started Khalil Herbert, and we mentioned, it's a dangerous game starting him. It's kind of a disappointing week, but at least he was productive. 10 rushes, 76 yards. If he can keep those stats, even around those stats, just getting the volume there, 3 targets out the backfield, he gets a couple of those catches. We're talking a complete different outcome, but that is how it shook down, and a positive for Khalil owners, and something we're never happy to see, but Roshan Johnson did leave with a concussion. He only played 9% of snaps. They played Thursday, so you have that slight, will he be available next week because it was Thursday, next week Sunday? Probably not, though. It's a rare thing we see the NFL clear guys after a week. He does have those couple extra days, so there is a chance. That's something we're going to monitor through the week. And we saw the fullback come in and get a bunch of
Yeah,
carries.
blasting game. It was.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, they were just salting away the game at the end. Khalil Herbert tried to go back in after he hurt his ankle. He kind of bent it back really weird, going for a catch. Then he tried to come back in later, ran the ball like one time, and you could just see that he had them pull him back out because he just couldn't run on it.
yeah. And I mean, that's really it for the Bears offense. Cairo Santos had a very productive fantasy day. I mean, he made all 4 of his extra points, all 4 of his field goals. Coming into this game, he had not very good weeks. Even that week against the Broncos, where, the Bears offense exploded, he only got, 5 extra points, so 5 fantasy points. I doubt he was a guy people started, but worth mentioning, he had a very solid week.
Yeah, worth mentioning. Chasing points on kickers sometimes gets you burned because one week the offense will be really good. What I like doing as far as kickers, pick one on a good offense and kind of roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, moving on to the Commanders side of the ball, we saw a really bad start in this game from Sam Howell and the whole offense in general.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it didn't really look like they were having much success with that Bears defense, the Bears defensive front, which is surprising because they were pretty much ranked last in the league up until last night. They were getting to Sam Howell. They picked him off once. I mean, the first half was pretty much amounted to nothing until like the very end where he had a big pass to Logan Thomas. And aside from that, it was looking very bleak. They were down 24, was it 24 to 3?
I believe
At
so.
the 24, 27 to 3 at the end of the first half. So
I think it was 27-3. I think it was 27.
I think it was 27. They were down. They were down 24. And so, I mean, they came back out in the second half, down 24 points. They had to air the ball out, which caused Sam Howell to finish 37 of 51. Got 388 yards, 2 touchdowns, carried the ball 4 times for 19 yards. I mean, this is the stuff that we talked about. Granted, a lot of it came because they did so poorly in the first half that they had no choice but to air it out in the second half. But even then, I mean, once he started hitting, he looked good.
Yeah.
And he's another quarterback that like I said, I feel fairly confident just because they throw the ball so much. And with that volume, the guys that they have around him, Dotson's not really getting the most work, but he's a good receiver. McLaurin's very good. Logan Thomas is skilled. Curtis Samuel, so on and so forth. They have skilled guys on that offense. And he's a guy that I feel like kind of like a Walmart-ish Brock Purdy type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he came out, he gave you 26.42 fantasy points, which after that first half, I mean, especially he was one of my starts of the week for quarterback position, and it was looking a little bleak. I was like, oh God, it was another first half. Like last week, we told people to start Jordan Love, but they ended up coming through. The guy who didn't really come through in this one was Brian Robinson, and I think what we saw in this game is he is, a subject to the game script. If they go down big, you're not going to see much Brian Robinson. The first offensive snap of the game that the Commanders had, he takes a run for 5 yards. We're like, oh, this is looking great. And then he proceeds to get 5 more carries for 5 more yards for the rest of the game.
Yep.
This is not what we expected out of Brian Robinson. I mean, he was projected anywhere from 11 to 14 points, depending on what site you play on. And he finished with 8.3 PPR because he caught 4 passes for 33 yards. And that's not usually what we see out of Brian Robinson. It's nice to see him catch those passes, but the reality of what we saw was when the Commanders, and if the Commanders go down, you are going to see a whole lot of Antonio Gibson. I mean, Brian Robinson only played, 36% of the snaps or so?
Yeah, 36.
Yeah, 36% of the snaps. And that is, especially given now that they have Eric Bieniemy, two of the guys that kind of fit his play calling style are Antonio Gibson and, in my opinion, Curtis Samuel, because they're kind of gadget guys. You can have them run, you can have them, go out there and run routes. You can line them up behind it. He can do a lot more with them. And Brian Robinson has kind of a more limited skill set in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was his worst game. I still like Brian Robinson moving forward. It was his first game under 10 carries, his first game under 3 yards per carry. They got absolutely demolished in the first half of that game and just didn't have. So it's kind of a gamble, because the reality of it is we don't know how good this Washington team really is. They're 3-2 right now. It doesn't make sense, and every time they play the Eagles, it's a great game. But they play the Eagles to overtime, and then they get their asses kicked by the Bears. So we don't know what Washington Commanders team we're going to get any given week, which does make me nervous for Brian Robinson, just because we see that he's not independent of the game script. So, I mean, I'd really monitor if it's a team that they're going up against that, like, when they played the Bills, it's like, okay, they're going to get killed. That's a game that I'd avoid playing Brian Robinson now at this point that we know what they're going to do. But, games that might look a little better, I'm still rolling with him. But yeah, it makes me pretty nervous now. And like I said, Antonio Gibson, he did not get a single carry in this one. But that's the thing about it, is if they're down like that, they're going to use him as like another receiver out of the backfield. Because, I mean, he has experience playing wide receiver in college. He's done it before. And this is kind of, it's been his role on this team, the receiving back, but it looked like it took another step forward. Like, he was a legitimate receiver out of the backfield, not even getting a single carry, like I said. Caught 4 of 6 passes for 64 yards. Gave you 10.4 PPR points, finished with a better day than Brian Robinson. And I think that just goes to show is now we're dealing with the dilemma on any given week. We don't know if the Commanders are going to be playing from behind, which if they are, it's going to be a Gibson week. If they're not, if it's a positive game script, it's going to be a Robinson week. So, like I said, it just makes me nervous. But now we know that Gibson is a little bit more viable than we thought. He was looking like dust, like 2 weeks in a row of 3 points, not really getting much activity. But if he can kind of see that role expand, then that's something to look forward to. Got to watch out for. As far as the receivers, I'd say it was a very disappointing day for Terry McLaurin. One thing that we were excited for is each week his targets had been going up. He'd gotten up to 10 targets last week, and this week we see him drop down back to 5.
Yeah.
And I still feel comfortable with Terry McLaurin. He's still getting those deep targets. One of them happened to be a pass interference, which doesn't get you anything on the stat sheet. Another one was an arguable pass interference. Again, doesn't get you anything on the stat sheet, but he's at least garnering those targets, and he's like that deep threat down the field when it's not for some odd reason De'Ami Brown.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, you're not going to get any points for those pass interference, so naturally he did not have a big day, which is surprising. I mean, you see that Sam Howell completed 37 passes, you're like, oh my God, and had 2 touchdowns. You're like, Terry had a huge day, right? Or at least Jahan Dotson. No, not at all. Jahan Dotson, another one, only got 5 targets. He did even less with his, caught 3 of them for 30 yards. Mm-hmm. If anything, right now, he's like a bench stash guy. He's not giving me anything. I mean, he got the touchdown at the last second of the game last week. But as we talk about touchdowns every week, they're not something you can count on a week-to-week basis. So this week we saw him come out, and if you're playing in a PPR setting, gave you 6. If not, he gave you 4.5 or 3. So he's very skilled, someone that I'd rather not drop. So he's kind of a bench stash for now, depending on the needs of your team. And Curtis Samuel, this is the second week in a row that he's scored over 18 points. He is, like I said, with Bieniemy, he's kind of that gadget guy. They can put him in the backfield. They can run end arounds with him. He's there, available in the middle of the field. He's fast enough. They can go downfield with it. He kind of is the little jack-of-all-trades guy that really fits with the scheme and what Bieniemy's trying to do. And we've seen that. I mean, his worst week so far is like 6.2 points. He's had 3 games in double digits now. He's on the field for 70% of the snaps. And he's the guy that's doing the most with his targets. Caught 6 of 7 for 65 yards and a touchdown. Touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. If we could see a little bit more consistency out of this offense, Curtis Samuel's a guy I like every week going forward. But right now, he's proved his worth as a solid wide receiver 3 or flex option, especially in the midst of all these bye weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then that takes us to kind of the star of the show for the Washington Commanders. Would have finished with a bigger day if he didn't fumble. I mean, he was fighting for those yards. Defender ripped it out. Shit happens. But Logan Thomas, he was a guy that I said when he was on the field, as he's been on the field, he has been a solid option. And right now, it looks like he might very well be Sam Howell's favorite target.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the 11 targets was probably a bit of a spike due to the fact that they could not run the ball and they completely abandoned the run. So I don't think 11 targets, even 8 or 9, I don't know if that'll be the norm. But even then, he's completing on average. It's going to go up after this week, but before this, 24 passes per game. And the tight end happens to be one of his favorite targets. He went 9 for 11, 77 yards. Touchdown. He was everywhere. Mm-hmm. It was, another complete. Oh my God, it's Logan Thomas again. Oh, it's Logan Thomas again. Having anybody else on your parlay last night, it was just after a certain point. Okay, can we please throw the ball to somebody else? But he was available. He was making plays. He was there. He got the touchdown. He almost got 2 touchdowns. And finished with 20.7 PPR points. I mean, we talked about how we liked the 2 tight ends in this game. And with what you're working with, Pat Freiermuth is out this week.
David Njoku.
Hey, I mean, yeah. David Njoku's out. And I mean, these 2 guys already played. So if you did not pick them up and play them, then depending on what you're dealing with for next week and the weeks coming, he's definitely got, put a waiver claim. This guy is solid.
Yeah, and
he's not going to burn you.
And what people, not many people know, and again, this was 3 years ago, but since then, Logan Thomas is a guy that's been dealing with a lot of injuries. He always has problems staying healthy. But 3 years ago, Logan Thomas was tight end 3 in PPR leagues on the season. He finished with 110 targets, 72 receptions. I mean, Logan Thomas can ball when he is on the field. He is definitely someone worth looking at. I mean, going forward, I almost like him more than a David Njoku. I know Njoku just had a very solid game, but I like Logan Thomas a lot. Over Pat Freiermuth for sure from what we've seen from the Steelers offense this season. I mean, he's definitely someone to consider. Again, they have some favorable matchups coming for tight ends. They play the Falcons, they play the Giants, and then they go back and play Philadelphia again. I mean, he's definitely someone to keep an eye on, depending your buys, things like that. But at the very worst, Logan Thomas, if you have to plug him in and play him a week, I like that a lot.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, over a guy like Kyle Pitts, over guys like on the same team, Jonnu Smith.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at this point, I'm almost looking at him as a replacement for Darren Waller.
Yeah. No, at least until the Giants can figure out how to get Darren Waller the ball successfully. And, another name we really threw around, especially on our waiver wire on who to pick up, Curtis Samuel. And once again, Curtis Samuel, he just looks good. He's another guy that when the Commanders can move the ball, and Sam Howell's proving that he can do that, Curtis Samuel is a dog. I'm not surprised that he's finishing, above Terry fantasy points for, a week, 2 week, however it may be. I think we can see a couple more games this season that he finishes the wide receiver 1 on the week for the Commanders. So, I mean, I definitely like him a lot more than Jahan Dotson at this point. I obviously like Terry McLaurin a lot more. But, I mean, Curtis Samuel is very solid.
Yeah. With that, I think we'll take it into the Sunday games. Derek, start us off in London once again, the 6:30 game.
Yeah, in London again. The NFL must hate the Jaguars, but at the same time, at least they let them stay in London. And I think that can possibly give them a bit of an advantage in this game. The Jaguars are at the Bills in London. Um, Again, we saw the Jaguars play in London last week, so they got to stay there. The Bills obviously having to travel across the pond. That is not, ideal to have to do midweek. Um, but the Jaguars just have not looked that great. And the Bills have a very solid defense. I know they just lost Tre'Davious White, but again, they have shown, as Schiff has mentioned before in previous episodes, they've shown that they can still compete even without him at the highest of levels. The Bills have the number 4 ranked pass defense, and Trevor Lawrence hasn't looked the greatest. Um, Zay Jones, also worth mentioning, he's questionable for this week, but it is seeming like he is trending towards possibly playing. If he does play, he saw 7 targets week 1, 6 targets week 2 before he was injured. That's going to hurt Calvin Ridley. That's going to hurt Christian Kirk a little bit. I think Evan Ingram will go unscathed. He's just a very solid option in that offense. But I mean, it's a tough one. I think if you have other options in comparison to Trevor Lawrence, and we've discussed it before, there's other guys that just matchup I like more. ETN, I'm starting. Calvin Ridley, it's just you drafted him so high, you have to start him. I still feel comfortable with Christian Kirk on how he's played, Evan Ingram. But it could be, it could be a rough week. I mean, I don't know how Schiff feels about this game. I think the Bills win this game, but it's just tough with how Trevor Lawrence and that offense has looked the past couple weeks. They've kind of declined every week. I know they just, had the game against the Falcons, but again, that's the Falcons in comparison to the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, a couple stats to watch out for. Like you said, the Bills have a really good pass defense right now. They're only giving up 169.5 yards through the air each week. And granted, a lot of that did come when they had Tre'Davious White still on the field. So that will take effect. But one thing that I've mentioned is it's not like, they haven't played without White before. He's had injuries that have held him out for, the whole season, if not long periods of time. And so this is a team that's used to being down, much like the Baltimore Ravens, having to play with the next guy up. So I don't think that'll, while it will have effect because they won't be as good without him, I don't think it'll be as big of a thing as, for example, the Dallas Cowboys losing
Trayvon
Diggs and having to go to Deron Bland. Even though he got a pick 6 on Mac Jones this past week, but, what is that really saying? And then another stat to watch out for is the Jacksonville Jaguars are only giving up 94.8 rush yards per game so far this year. And while we saw Bijan really kind of go to town on them, as far as James Cook, we've seen Latavius Murray eating in a little more to that workload than we'd be comfortable with. And, just because they're only giving up 94, 95 rush yards a game right now doesn't mean that the Bills will not have success running against them, but it is going to be a difficult task. And considering that he's not getting, the lion's share of that workload, we didn't see him be that efficient last week on the ground. Again, that touchdown and that 48-yard catch kind of salvaged his day, but it could be some tough sledding for James Cook this week.
And I'd 100% agree with that. It's kind of polar opposites with these defenses. The Jaguars are good against the rush, the Bills are good against the pass, and vice versa. So you could see a tough week for Trevor Lawrence through the air, and then you could see a tough week for the Bills running game as a whole on the ground. With that being said, Josh Allen is an obvious must start. Stephon Diggs is a must start. The tight ends, I don't love starting either of them just because we're seeing such a kind of share in snap counts. And I know Kincaid I like more than Dawson Knox, but also, I just think there's better options. When we spoke before this week, a Cole Kmet, a Logan Thomas, guys like that, where they're just the guy in that tight end role. I like them more. But Again,
Yeah, like, with Cole Kmet, you're not really seeing much of a 50-50 thing there with Robert Tonyan as to compare, like in Buffalo, you're seeing them be on the field a lot of times at the same time.
mhm,
It's not very much separation at all. And maybe rest of season, I like Dalton Kincaid just because of that
yeah,
talent, and
oh
he's
yeah,
basically like a slot receiver playing tight end
mhm.
on a very good team. So it's like I like him moving forward, but I'd like to see him separate himself more before I feel comfortable starting him every week.
Yeah, and the last guy on that offense is Gabe Davis. He has been very solid this year, mainly because he's caught a touchdown in 3 of the 4 games. He has 3 out of his 4 games, he's had 4 targets or less, and 3 out of his 4 games, he's only caught 3 receptions at most. He has a 1 reception game, a 2 reception game, and a 3 reception game. So it's just tough. His best game was against the Raiders, who do not have that good of a secondary. I mean, we'll see. He's a touchdown or bust guy. It's the Bills. They score a lot of touchdowns. There's a good chance that he booms again, but beware because when he busts, there is a very good chance that that bust can be 3, 4 fantasy
Yeah,
points. But that's just the
it's
risk
gonna
you
burn
take.
you. It's just a lot of these guys are the same, like him, like Drake London, like guys of kind of that caliber. They're all kind of the same. You just have to take like, okay, Gabe Davis plays for the Bills. The Bills are going to have chance to score more touchdowns. So do I want a
Hmm.
touchdown dependent guy on a team that scores more touchdowns, or one that struggles to throw the ball entirely?
Yeah.
And, they're not putting up points.
Yeah.
So that's just that it helps making that decision if you think about what team they're on
Yeah.
and who has the opportunity to actually score when they need to score. It's like if
Hmm.
you have a touchdown dependent guy that can't score touchdowns, while Drake London has got it done. I mean, you guys have seen that Atlanta Falcons offense. Desmond Ridder is the worst quarterback in the NFL. No one can convince me otherwise.
100% agree. But I mean, that's all I had for our 6:30 a.m. game in London.
All right, well then I will take that from the Bills to their division rival, the Dolphins, who will be hosting the New York Giants. Honestly, Vegas thinks this is going to be a blowout. I think this is going to be a blowout. The Dolphins are favored by 12.5 points. They're at home. They're coming off of an ass kicking. They just got beat by 28 points by a division rival.
Hmm.
And I mean, while their defense is not very good right now, they're giving up 28 or 29.8 points, 123.5 rushing yards, and 251 passing yards per game. They're going against the Giants offense that ranked 31st in yards per game, 22nd in or in total yards per game. They ranked 31st, 22nd in rush with only 94 rushing yards per game, and 30th in passing. They only is that yeah 158 passing yards per game,
Hmm.
or 138. My bad,
Yeah.
20 less. So while the Dolphins, you're like, oh, this is, a positive matchup. That we can get something. Number one, if Saquon Barkley doesn't play, it's going to look as ugly as it has. It's going to be fairly one-dimensional. While the Dolphins aren't necessarily good against the run, and I don't hate the Matt Breida pivot if you have to, if Saquon doesn't play. We've seen this for the past few weeks. The Giants they are dead last in points per game. They're scoring
Hmm.
11.5 points per game. So this isn't an offense that you're going to want much, with Saquon Barkley out. Like I said, it makes them very one-dimensional. Matt Breida does not offer the same things that Saquon Barkley does. And you're going up against the team that ranks first in all of the big offensive categories: pass yards per game, rush yards per game, points per game. This is going to be a boat race. I mean, they're going to have to throw the ball. But the thing about that is we just saw that offensive line give up 11 sacks to the Seattle Seahawks defense. Miami's defensive line, they're no slouches either. They have 10 sacks on the year. Daniel Jones is going to have pressure in his face the whole entire game. The Giants offensive line looks like it has the competency of a Pop Warner team.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be disrespectful to the Pop Warner team. It doesn't make sense. They can't block anything. They're giving running lanes to the defensive ends that you want to give to running backs. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I mean, I think Miami defense is a smash start this week.
Yeah.
Should I be wrong on that? I just don't see it happening. The Giants are so bad in every offensive category. The one thing that I do think might be a bright spot for them this week is Darren Waller.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because in week 2, we saw the Dolphins defense give up 11 catches on 13 targets, 85 yards and a touchdown to the Patriots tight ends, which kind of akin to the Giants. The tight ends happen to be their only real weapon on offense. They have some wide receivers, just like the Giants have Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard, Paris Campbell, and so on and so forth, Jalen Hyatt. Wan'Dale's the only wide receiver that I'm interested in taking a look at. I'm not remotely thinking about starting him this week, even given, the woes of the Miami defense. I think they're going to be coming out with a fire lit under them. And if anything, you grab Wan'Dale, stash him, see if you can get a couple consistent weeks and see if that Giants offense can score a touchdown in the first half, maybe. But other than that, as far as the Giants, I'm rolling Darren Waller. I'm rolling him this week just because I like the opportunity that he has against a defense that has been somewhat susceptible to tight ends. And other than that, I'm not going Jones. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily his fault, but the dude has no time to throw the ball. He doesn't have time to think in that pocket. And then as far we already know this, even coming off a bad week, not even necessarily a horrible week, but for Tyreek Hill, that was a bad week.
Mm-hmm.
We're rolling him. We're rolling Jalen. We're rolling Tua. You're rolling HN. And honestly, I'm having a bit more trouble where I like to, I guess, rank Raheem Mostert at this point. But until we see Jeff Wilson Jr. come back and it's only him and HN in that backfield,
I like both of them.
They're still the number 1 offense in the league right now. You're still rolling out Mostert. But as far as long term, yeah, I'm a bit hesitant. A bit iffy. I'm trying to trade him away if I can. But this week, the Giants defense does not offer anything to be afraid of. You're rolling all your Dolphins. I mean, I guess I'd draw the line at I don't think I'd roll out Braxton Berrios. He's somewhat of an option to take a look at after we've seen him, have a couple decently solid weeks. But they did just sign Chase Claypool, which could very well hurt Braxton Berrios' relevancy in this offense. Could just relegate him to a return man. But, yeah, we'll see how that shakes out. I don't know when Claypool's going to get on the field. I don't know if he's going to be playing this week. But another thing to keep an eye on. And that's really all I got for this game.
Yeah, there's not even too much to touch on because the Dolphins, with how good their offense is, you have those obvious starts. With the Giants, how bad their offense has been, your only start I would like from you is Darren Waller, and I don't even like that much. I like the Dolphins defense this week. Breida again, as we talked about, if you have Barkley and he's out and, that's the only pivot you can go to, I don't absolutely hate it. By no means do I like it, but I don't hate it. So, and I mean, that's really it for that game. It's going to probably be ugly for the Giants again. And after how the Dolphins looked last week, it's probably going to be a bounce back week for them.
Yeah, and then, so that will go to, I mean, this is one I can not excited about. The Saints at the Patriots. I mean, we don't know yet if Derek Carr's fully healthy, but what we do know is he doesn't give a damn. Derek Carr is going to be on that field. And that hurts everybody except for Alvin Kamara. If you have a hobbled Derek Carr out there, you can expect to see a hell of a game from Alvin. 20-plus PPR points. If Carr is a bit better, then I feel more comfortable with. I mean, you have no choice but to roll out Chris Olave every week. Michael Thomas is a good option just because, even if Derek Carr does have to keep it close to the line, what does the guy excel at?
Mm-hmm.
Slants. So, I mean, other than that, you got those three.
Mm-hmm.
And for the Saints, I mean, Rashid Shaheed's not a guy I can count on if Derek Carr's not healthy. If they threw Jameis out there, I'm a little more interested in Shaheed because he's a burner and Jameis is a deep ball thrower. But I'm definitely monitoring the health of Derek Carr. Like I said, you don't really have much of a choice but to start Olave, but I'd be a bit more concerned with it if Carr's not going to be 100%, which I don't think he will be. And Patriots right now are allowing 24.2 points per game, 101 receiving yards per game, and 6 rushing yards. No. 101 rush yards per game. My apologies. And 196 passing yards per game.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not really giving up too much. They did just see Matt Judon and Christian Gonzalez, probably their two best defenders, go down.
Yeah.
And hell, as far as I'm aware, J.C. Jackson has been burnt toast for the last 2 years. So we'll see how he steps in and does. I don't think it's going to be as effective as Gonzalez. Yeah, Gonzalez has been one of the best corners in the league up until the point of him going out. So that's definitely going to hurt them. I think the Saints might, have some success on that front, given, especially with Judon being out.
That pass rush, huge hit.
The pass rush is not going to be anywhere near as good. I think Derek Carr will have a little more time. But like I said, what is that going to matter if he's hobbled anyways?
Mm-hmm.
It's probably going to be a lot of stuff close to the line of scrimmage. But on the other side of the ball, the Saints defense is only allowing 19 points per game, 103 rushing yards and 201 passing yards. But this is a Patriots offense that has not shown us anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I honestly, as far as starts for the Patriots this week,
none of them.
Depending on who you have at tight end, you're taking the shot on Hunter Henry just because like he seems to be Mac Jones' favorite target.
Yeah.
And he can, in a PPR setting, probably get you like 9-10 points if he happens to get that touchdown, which honestly, those are going to be hard to come by for the Patriots. Then he'll have a better week. But, both are stout defenses. Only 39 implied points in this game. It's not going to be anything, we're super excited about. Aside from Hunter Henry, man, no one on the page. Even Mondre this week I don't like.
I agree.
The Saints aren't giving up a whole bunch on the ground. And the Patriots, we've talked about Mondre's yards per carry this year. Zeke's not looking any better. I don't think this is going to be the get-right game for the Patriots. I don't know who's going to win by any means. This might end up being a 10-7 game, a 10-6 game, 9-6. It's one of those, in my opinion. But, man, hopefully better days are coming for the New England Patriots and their skill players. And better days are coming for the Saints and their skill players. Because, like I said, Derek Carr's not fully healthy right now. We already touched on that. You guys already know that. If we get any updates before the injury episode, we will let you guys know. But, yeah, right now, this is not looking like okay.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. And that's what's the scariest thing for Saints fantasy owners are, if Derek Carr does play and he's not fully healthy, Kamara benefits the most. Also without Jamal there, even if Derek Carr's fully healthy, whatever the case, Kamara's the guy in the backfield. Tony Jones, Kendre Miller just aren't ready. So Kamara is just by far, he's an absolute must start. Honestly, if you have a solid bench piece, and I know it's already a bye week, kind of a tough bye week for a receiver, but it's crazy to say, but if you can pivot from Chris Olave this week, if Derek Carr does play and they say he's still very limited with that AC sprain, I would not hate you for it because I think it could be another tough week through the air. Michael Thomas can possibly get some receptions, but Chris Olave has the crazy upside, but it's just if Derek Carr can't get the ball down the field, I just don't know if that upside is worth it. Also, very much depends if you have a very viable option off bench. I would look there. But other than that, keeping Chris Olave in the Patriots,
It's
yeah.
hard not to.
Yeah, it's hard not to. He's so talented. You drafted him so early. The Patriots side of the ball, I don't even want to touch on that more. I think Schiff covered it good. So, I mean,
There's
it's
just
just,
not too much to say. They haven't given us much
it's
to talk
ugly.
about.
Yeah.
It's disappointing, to say the very least.
Yeah. And I mean, that'll pivot us to our next game, which is the Houston Texans traveling to Atlanta and playing the Falcons. This one is a funny matchup to look at because both teams are fairly solid against the pass, and both teams are very mid against the rush. And that's going to benefit the Texans heavily. Desmond Ridder cannot pass the ball anyways. And now that he's playing a pass defense that we have seen stifle Trevor Lawrence a little bit, and then also Kenny Pickett in back-to-back weeks, they're now playing a quarterback that is not nearly as skilled as either of them. So it could be another tough week. If you have Drake London and you have guys on bye, he's a guy you have to throw in and hope he gets in the end zone. He's the only receiver that you even consider there.
Yeah, he's a guy you throw in, close your eyes, say a prayer, open him on Tuesday, see if you won.
Yeah, and I mean, Jonnu has had the up spike in targets. I don't know how long that's going to last. Kyle Pitts, I don't really like starting Jonnu or Kyle Pitts this week. It's just could be a very tough passing week for Desmond Ridder. On the other side, I mean, in the rushing room, obviously you love Bijan. Honestly, this is a week that I think they could struggle so heavily to pass the ball. I don't hate the Algier start if you absolutely have to. I honestly think we could see a week, and this might be a bold prediction. You think Algier could outscore Matt Breida if Saquon doesn't play this week?
I mean, no.
You don't think he will?
I think he could. I think he has the potential to, but I don't see. I just don't know. I mean, if they give Bijan the amount of carries they should,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's it's just
Yeah.
Bijan against the Houston rush defense should be. Now, if they get up and they're trying to salt the game away, I think they'll have a few Algier drives entirely at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a big if, and I just know Bijan is going to be involved. I know if Saquon doesn't play, Breida is going to be heavily involved, and I just have I have a hard time with Algier.
Yeah, no, and by no means am I saying start Algier, but that's a bold prediction I'm throwing out there. Algier outscores Breida this week. I'll throw out the crazy prediction. On the other side of the ball, the Texans, I like them in this matchup. CJ Stroud has been very good to start the year. This is also a very good Falcons pass defense. I'm not crazy worried. I don't know if I'm starting Stroud this week just because of the matchup. But if you told me you were, again, wouldn't hate you for it. He's been very good. Nico Collins will probably have another solid week. He could be stifled a little bit by AJ Terrell, but we'll have to see about that. I mean, again, it's a tough week with all the buys for receivers. Tank Dell in kind of like a flex spot. I don't hate that either. He's got that deep ball threat. Robert Woods and Dalton Schultz. I like rostering Robert Woods still, kind of towards the end of my bench, but I think he's kind of losing that traction to Tank Dell, and I think that'll just increase through the season. Someone I'm really excited about this week is Dameon Pierce. His snap percentage has increased every single week. We've seen him get in the end zone a couple times, and I think we're going to see that.
Out there.
Yeah, he does look good, and I think that percentage discrepancy between him and Singletary is going to increase again. And again, the Falcons' run defense is not the greatest. So I really like the Dameon Pierce start this week.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. Not too much to touch on. As far as like Robert Woods, I think the way we have viewed like Tyler Boyd throughout these past few years of the Bengals being a very dominant offensive juggernaut. Tyler Boyd's been viewed as a guy that you want to kind of keep on your roster, startable some weeks. I think it's safe to say we can view Robert Woods the same way we've been viewing Tyler Boyd.
Yeah.
If they are going to continue to be, the super stout offense like this, putting up points, passing a whole lot, then I see no reason why Robert Woods isn't rosterable one. And if, Tank Dell or Nico Collins were to miss a week or two, he's instantly a spot start.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just think the way things are changing, we got to kind of change our views along with them. The old offensive powers are not the offensive powers of today. We have to view the Texans like what they are until they stop doing it. And so far, they haven't shown us that they're going to stop putting up points anytime soon.
Yeah.
So I do like Robert Woods. Definitely at least worth a roster spot.
Yeah, 100%. If you're done with that one, I'm good. What's our next game?
We have an AFC South matchup. The Titans are going into Indianapolis, taking on the Colts. Over/under in this game is 43.5. Tennessee's favored by 2.5. This should be a typical Titans-Colts game. They're always fairly competitive, and I think that's what we're going to get out of this one. Titans defense, as far as the run goes, we're all aware, has been not only very stout, they've been the number one. Yep. They're only giving up 70 yards per game on the ground. They're only giving up 17.5 points per game right now, and then in the air is where you can really take advantage. They're giving up 241 passing yards per game. For me, Anthony Richardson, at this point, you're starting him every week. I don't really care. It's the same thing like with Lamar Jackson. You know what you have as far as the rushing upside, and if we can get that for a quarterback he's pretty damn good at throwing the ball too. He completed 11 passes for 205 yards in the last game. That just doesn't even sound right. But he's a start. You got Michael Pittman had a very, very poor week last week. Doesn't matter. Kicking the tires on him still.
Oh, yeah.
You were starting Michael Pittman, especially against this. I mean, up until last week, the Titans' pass defense had given up over 100 yards to each team's number one wide receiver. And Jamar Chase happened to get a little under that. But, Joe Burrow hasn't been doing too well.
No.
And if Jonathan Taylor's not playing in this one, I'm not starting Zach Moss.
Agree.
This is the best rush defense in the NFL. Zach Moss kind of just a guy. We saw him do well against the Ravens, and the Ravens do have a very good defense as well. They're among the top rushing defenses, but they're not the Titans. The Titans are just shut down when it comes to the run, and they're so bad on the pass that it's like, why are we going to just play into their hands?
Yeah.
So, and then on the other side, the Colts defense giving up 24.8 points per game, 126.8 rush yards per game, and 263 pass yards per game. The highlighted number here is the 126.8 rush yards per game. To me, it's a Derrick Henry week.
Yep.
He should eat. As far as other Titans, I mean, Tyjae Spears is... I mean, if you have Derrick Henry and you don't have Tyjae Spears, you're making a huge mistake. Because that's one big with a guy like that, as old as he is, it's very good to have your handcuff. But I mean, Tyjae Spears is slowly working his way into some flex appeal. He's getting targets every week. He's kind of their third down 2-minute back. He's seeing more and more time on the field. I mean, there's plays they have him on the field with Derrick Henry. There's plays that he's on by himself. He's just somebody that's definitely worth looking at, and especially, like I said, if you're a Derrick Henry owner and you don't have him, what you're doing. But pass catchers, D-Hop is... It's just tough because Ryan Tannehill's not going to provide you with too much. And when you're seeing some of that work go to Nick Westbrook-Akina and Josh Wiley,
Mm-hmm.
it just makes it very hard because, this. I think you can start D-Hop this week just because the Colts defense has not been very good against the pass. But he's a guy that I just, moving forward, I don't really like. I don't like the Titans passing offense. The Titans don't like their own passing offense. I mean, hell, Derrick Henry threw a damn touchdown.
Yeah.
To the tight end.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not, it's one of those things I'm not too excited about. If you got him, like I said, it's a good week to start him. But moving forward, like if he has a blow up game this week, I am absolutely trading DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
There's just not. It's one of those things. The piece of the pie is not large enough for too many guys to eat, and he still likes throwing the ball to Nick Westbrook-Akine.
Mm-hmm.
Treylon Burks is going to eventually be back out there again. It's too muddled, way too muddled for me.
Yeah.
But
And
that's all I got for that game.
Yeah, well, yeah, I just wanted to add, Treylon Burks, like 15 minutes ago, was ruled out, didn't practice all week, so it shouldn't be a surprise, but Treylon Burks will not be out there.
Whenever he gets back on the field.
And I mean, there's not even too much to touch on. I like starting to like Derrick Henry again. We're starting to see some flashes. This is a really good matchup. D-Hop.
I think he's a guy that used to be completely matchup independent, and then one thing that we have to just accept this year is he's no longer that.
He's getting older. He's losing the step, I mean, that just happens. But yeah, D-Hop, I avoided him. I have no D-Hop stock anywhere because of Ryan Tannehill, and we're seeing why. I'm not surprised by it, but yeah, I mean, not too much to touch on.
I mean, dude, it's like one of those things. It's like, okay, we sat here and watched what he did to A.J. Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And people still drafted D-Hop. Like, you don't think he's going to do the same thing?
They drafted D-Hop early, like fifth round.
Hey, man, I fell for it with the Lions and Jahmyr Gibbs. I fell for it with that.
But
just
that
like
makes sense.
People fell for Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
It's like some of these things, it's like, come on, guys, we got to smarten up.
Yeah.
But, I did forget to mention a couple guys that I'm interested in, but not necessarily. Like Josh Downs, I'm probably rostering. I like if he's able to get that number 2 spot moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Alec Pierce, just the guy I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I agree with both those. I like Downs a lot, and he's young and he's emerging. I think that his rapport with Anthony Richardson's only going to grow 100%. I like that. And last game on my end is the Panthers are traveling to Detroit to play the Lions. Start with the Panthers side of the ball. Miles Sanders, full participant in practice. He will, due to a groin injury, but full participant. He is going into the game with no injury designation. So do what you want with that. The Lions are very good against the rush.
Yes, they have been.
Yeah.
Last year too.
Yeah, so the Lions and Titans are in very similar situations there. The Lions are not very good against the pass. So Miles Sanders is healthy. They say no injury designation. I don't know how much I like the matchup, only because of how stout the Lions are against the defense, or against the rush. But again,
it's going to be like a 14 rushes for 36 yards type of game for Miles
and it's going to come down to how many targets and receptions he gets out the backfield, and he can salvage you like a 10 to 12 point week. If you're fine taking that risk, go ahead and do it. Maybe he gets in the end zone, has a solid week, but definitely someone I am very shaky on starting. Adam Thielen is a absolute must start. I am rolling Adam Thielen until he proves otherwise, and I don't think he will anytime soon as long as he's healthy. We are going to see a return. Jonathan Mingo will return this week, and that is kind of going to shake up that receiver room a little bit. Jonathan Mingo, I only say so because he had seen 19 targets through 3 weeks, his first 3 weeks. He wasn't doing too much with the targets. That's the thing with Mingo. He had 2 catches on 5 targets, 3 on 8, and 3 on 6, and they're also very short targets, 17, 26, and 21 yards. Just worth mentioning because he does get a good amount of looks his way, which makes sense. They're trying to get the rookie implemented.
Yeah.
In his absence, we saw Terrace Marshall take a giant step forward. He's another crazy young receiver. He's obviously talented. For the Panthers, he had a very solid week last week. It's just tough. I mean, DJ Chark, another one. He had that one crazy week. I kind of have him as like the
I
fourth.
mean, with Terrace Marshall, we've seen this year in and year out since they drafted him because he was on that LSU team with Joe Burrow and
Mm-hmm.
Jamar Chase, and he was one of the. I mean, the first dynasty league I was in, I drafted him, expecting him. Oh God, he's gonna be the wide receiver one on the pit. He hasn't done. He'll show flashes, and then he just fades back into nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, these last 2 weeks, he's gotten a decent amount of targets, a high amount of targets.
Mm-hmm.
But when is he gonna pull his Terrace Marshall act and fade back into the background? That's
Yeah.
especially just being on this Panthers team where right now it looks like Adam Thielen and Miles Sanders are the only usable guys. I don't know if I'm putting Terrace Marshall or even Mingo yet into that.
Yeah.
It's
No,
just
I 100% agree with that. I don't think either of them are necessarily worth even rostering yet. They're just, young guys that are worth keeping an eye on. Hayden Hurst, after week
yeah.
one, has faded into the abyss from what we have known
No,
from
no.
Hayden Hurst fantasy wise, at least, other than that 1 year in Atlanta. Um, and I mean, I like Bryce Young, not fantasy wise. I think he's done a decent job, in that offense. He's done what he could, but I'm obviously not looking at him. Chuba Hubbard, worth mentioning. He is okay. He's solid. If Miles Sanders was going to miss this week, I didn't hate Chuba Hubbard just because his receiving upside, but he is not missing.
Yeah.
So if you have Miles Sanders, it's worth rostering him. Otherwise, I mean, I feel like he's kind of at like the top of who's available on the waiver wire, but I don't know if he's on my team. But he's like top who's available. So, and I mean,
If you're in a much deeper league, then Chuba's worth the roster spot. But otherwise, I mean, if you're a Miles Sanders owner, definitely.
yeah, if you're 12 man, you probably have Chuba on the roster. If you're 10 man, you probably don't. And
You
again,
know.
but he's right. He's just not making the cut just yet. And then for the Lions side of the ball, this one's going to be interesting. Amon-Ra uh, will not he's not in line to practice today. He has not practiced all week due to that abdomen injury. That is looking like Amon-Ra will not play. So then you're looking at the other options through that pass game. You're looking at Josh Reynolds, who has been limited all week due to a groin injury. I'm sure
Come here to the moon.
I'm sure Josh Reynolds will try to play, and we'll provide updates, via Instagram or our episode tomorrow if we have updates by then. But he's been limited all week, and then you look at
I thought you were saying Josh Reynolds going to provide updates.
no. We will provide the updates on
No,
Josh
we will
Reynolds.
not Josh Reynolds.
And then you look at the other receivers, the highest upside of them is obviously Jamison Williams. It has been quite a while since we've seen him play football, but if Amon-Ra misses and Josh Reynolds is kind of dealing with a lingering injury, he might come in and have to be the wide receiver one right away. So, I mean, we'll
They're
see.
just going to run the ball.
I was going to say, because the Panthers are 6th against the pass, and that's why I don't like starting Jamison Williams. Even if Amon-Ra's out, I think it's a hold week. You see how he does. The other two, Khalif Raymond, Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones, it might be time to hang it up. I'm sorry, I really like you, but it might be that time. Khalif Raymond's not a viable fantasy option.
98 years old.
Yeah, and he's out there, still getting his cardio in. But I mean, like Schiff said, the Panthers, 6th against the pass, 27th against the rush. David Montgomery owners, I don't want to hear it from you. I don't like you. It is what it is.
Okay,
He
hold on.
is.
There's one in specific. Not all of them. Just the one in specific.
Yeah,
David Montgomery owners, don't come at us. There's only one he doesn't like.
I know, but it's just only because we hyped up Jahmyr Gibbs so much. I mean, I'm very happy for David Montgomery owners. He has been amazing this season. And, he's a good back. He was a good back in Chicago. The Lions revamped that running back room completely. And when they let Swift go for Montgomery, and Swift is doing amazing things, incredible things in Philadelphia. But David Montgomery's been no slouch. I mean, his yards per carry aren't the greatest, but with what the Lions are trying to do on offense, he has fit that perfectly for them. He's been the workhorse back. We haven't seen Jahmyr get involved nearly as much as we hope. David Montgomery's a must start. Jahmyr is also a must start, especially if Amon-Ra misses. I'm not going to say you're going to, because honestly at this point I don't even know what they plan to do with Jahmyr for this season. But we should see an up spike in those targets. We should expect 5+ targets for Jahmyr this game, if not more.
Yeah.
We might see him lined up in the slot a decent amount of plays, just because they're a little thin at receivers, depending on Josh Reynolds as well. I mean, I like David Montgomery, I like Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta. I don't even need to touch on him. He is the number one target, especially if Amon-Ra misses. He is a must start. The other guys, Josh Reynolds, depending if you really want to roll the dice, because his upside, I do like his upside, but that's a very risky one. Jameson Williams, I'd kick the tires and wait a week. Jared Goff, I do not like the start this week because of the reasons we just talked about. When your top two receivers are banged up, when your clear number one might miss, when the team you're playing is terrible against the rush, and when you've shown you love running the ball. Jared Goff owners, I know could have quarterbacks on bye, but I think there's better options out there than Goff. I think the Lions could win this one 24 to like 10, 13, something like that, and you could see Montgomery with 25 carries again.
Yep. I mean, it's pretty simple, straight to the point. There's not too much to it. Really depends on the health of Amon-Ra and Jones, and if they don't play, you know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
And then I think with that, we're gonna move on to our very last game of the morning slate, and that's going to be my Ravens taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
The Steelers. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Go on.
Guys, this will be the last episode of the first Team Fantasy podcast. No, but the over-under in this game is 38 points. Baltimore's favored by 4.5, traveling to Pittsburgh, so Vegas thinks this one's going to be a bit one-sided.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, with all the reason to. The Ravens are only giving up 14.5 points per game, 92.5 rushing yards per game, and 168 pass yards per game. And they just so happen to be going up against one of the worst offenses in the National Football League. They were only able to put up 6 points against the Texans. Kenny Pickett went down with what was said was a bone bruise or something akin to an MCL sprain or strain. And he said he will be playing this Sunday. I don't know. I don't think that the recipe for winning against the Baltimore Ravens is playing a hobbled quarterback, but that's Mike Tomlin's decision.
Mm-hmm.
And your decision will be to sit pretty much all of your Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Guys, I genuinely don't think. I mean, that's not just a homer opinion. The Ravens have genuinely been very good on defense, and they're going up against not only hardly competent but hobbled offense. Yeah. They've lost offensive linemen. They do not have Freiermuth this week, and they still don't have Deontay Johnson back. They're going into this one. If you want to get crazy, go Darnell. No, don't do that. But I think the Ravens' defense is worth a start this week.
Yeah.
Other than that, you know what you got. You got Lamar, you're starting him. You got Mark Andrews, you're starting. Zay Flowers, in my opinion, is a great start this week.
Yeah.
He's going up against the Steelers defense that's giving up 254 passing yards per game. 25 points per game. The Ravens should score in this one. And granted, it's going to be tough. The Ravens and Steelers, no matter what, every super difficult game. So it may very well be a low scoring, one of those, 20-14, something like that. Some field goals here and there. But I genuinely think Gus Edwards is a surefire start this week.
Wow.
And that is because the Steelers are giving up 148.5 yards on the ground per game. Gus Edwards got the lion's share of the carries last week.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking like the guy there. And while Lamar is stepping in and taking some of that rushing volume, and he's taken, some of those, he's got like 4 goal line touchdowns or 4 rushing touchdowns to Gus's 1.
Mm-hmm.
I think this week there will be opportunity for Gus Edwards to ball out. He's been doing well. The line's been blocking well for him, and he's usually does well against the Steelers. I think Justice Hill's kind of not getting worked out, but they're definitely going to Gus as the guy at this point. That's what I think it's very clear to see. And, if a team gives up almost 150 yards on the ground every week, there's a chance that Gus might get like 70, 80 of those in a touchdown. As far as everybody else, Odell's set to return this week, I believe, as is Rashad Bateman. Not really very interested in Rashad Bateman. Anything outside of a dynasty setting, I'm not too interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And then Odell is I genuinely don't think Odell is going to see too much extreme use until later in the season, because the Ravens are going to want to keep him fresh and healthy. That's about it. You got Mark, you got Gus, you got Lamar, you got Zay. On the other side of the ball, if you have to start George Pickens,
I was going to say, yeah.
Or Calvin Austin, I guess, go ahead. But I really don't like any starts on the Pittsburgh side of the ball. They've had trouble even getting I think they had like 13 yards through most of that first half of that game against the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's about it for this one. I mean, the implied point total is only 38.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be that high scoring of a game, and the Steelers shouldn't score much at all.
Yeah, I don't even have too much to add. That's what I was going to say, is if you are going to roll the dice on anyone on Pittsburgh, it's George Pickens, just because the talent upside. Najee broke double digits for the first week this season. Woo. I'm not starting Najee. I like Jaylen Warren more than Najee if you're deciding between the two this week. Ravens side of the ball, Lamar, Zay, Mark, the defense, Justin Tucker, and, Gus Edwards also. If the Steelers' rush defense is piss poor, you're not going to see Odell, Rashad Bateman get overworked their first week back, especially if they don't have to, and they probably won't have to this week. Yeah.
No. But yeah, guys, that's about it. Tomorrow we will be back with the afternoon games, the Sunday night preview, and the Monday night preview. So,
and the injury report.
What it is. Oh yeah, and the injury report, very important. But you guys know what it is. Thank you once again for being here with us. Keep on giving your support, and we'll keep on putting out good content for you guys. Derek, if you got anything else?
Take more reps with the first team. My first time saying it. Let's get it.
You already know, baby. See you guys next time.